Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to TechGig webinar series, our endeavor to impart techies. We believe that sharing of knowledge is the key to enhance our skills and to assist professionals. With this principle in mind, we have initiated a series of webinars conducted by industry experts to give you all a crisp insight of various domains. The topic of today's session is Acceptance Test Driven Development using Selenium Web Driver. Our guest speaker today is Jyoti Mandhare, Senior Manager QA, Nest Technologies Limited. Jyoti is a Senior QA Manager working with Pearson EDC and Nest Technologies Private Limited. She has over 15 years of experience in software development lifecycle, iterative and agile. Her areas of specialization are in automation and QA processes. She has varied exposure in functional and non-functional testing. So without further delay, I introduce you all to our guest speaker. Over to you, Jyoti.
Thank you, Mohini, and good afternoon, everyone. So today I will be basically taking you through acceptance test-driven development with Selenium Web Driver. The focus would be definitely more on QA testing in agile environments and how to do basically testing in when you are using acceptance test-driven development methodology of agile as your development methodology. Okay, just would go through the agenda. So I'll be explaining what exactly we mean by acceptance test-driven development. The acronym is ATDD. What should be the QA processes in ATDD? How to achieve in-sprint automation. So the automation is one of the best practices in agile world, and we would focus more on how to get the things automated within the sprints itself. Acceptance test driven development, acceptance test driven framework with Selenium. How should be your framework, or I'll just explain a generic framework and how you can build on it. What are the benefits of ATDD? And finally, a case study where we have implemented this particular methodology and how successful this has been. I would like to begin basically with these two lines. Developers write unit tests to determine if their code is doing things right, and customers write acceptance tests to determine if the system is doing the right things. So these lines aptly describe two major testing aspects. Two mindsets basically, one from the developer angle and one from the QA or the customer angle. Where unit testing probably is done by the developers, and acceptance tests can be done by the customers as well as by the QA. Let us now focus on what exactly is acceptance test driven development and what exactly is this process. I'll try to be, I have put this in a very generic term so that those not practicing Agile can also understand certain aspects of this. So test-driven development, basically, let us start with a functional requirement. Let us say you have got a functional requirement. The next step, once you get a functional requirement, is drafting acceptance tests. So the QA starts drafting the acceptance tests. These test cases are reviewed not only by the QA leads, but they are also reviewed by the developers. The developers, after reviewing the test cases, will start implementing the functionality. So for a developer, there are two sets basically. One which is right away the functional requirement that they have, which we also term as a user story in Agile terms. So they have a user story, they have requirements for that user story, plus they have acceptance tests which may be written by a QA, may be written by a BA also. So these acceptance test cases further enhance those requirements, and the developers can start implementing the functionality looking at this particular test cases. The next step would be executing this acceptance test cases. Review the results once you execute the acceptance test cases. So there could be failures. So initially there may be a lot number of failures because probably the code may not be built to facilitate this particular acceptance test. But as eventually the code starts building up, the number of test cases that fail will go on reducing. So if there are any reviews after reviewing the result, if there are any changes that requires to be made for the acceptance test due to some change in the requirement, can be done, and this cycle will basically repeat unless all your acceptance test passes. And once all your acceptance passes, the user story would get accepted. So this is in a nutshell what exactly is acceptance test driven development. Moving ahead, I'll just explain what exactly do you mean by acceptance tests. Acceptance tests are also called as customer tests or functional tests. So when a person writes an acceptance test, the focus is more on whether the system is being built correctly or the system is functioning exactly as to how the requirements should be. That is, we have built the system correctly. So these are also called as customer tests or functional tests. Tells us whether system does what a customer expects. So once my acceptance tests are accepted or a particular user story is accepted, that means all the coding part, all the testing part for that particular story is done, and this particular story can be pushed right away into the production. So this is when we say acceptance tests passed, it means that it is ready to ship to production. It enables the developers also to know that they have satisfied the requirements, because this is the basis on which probably the developers would also develop their code. It can be run automatically at any time by anyone. So eventually a developer can run this test, or QA will definitely run this test. Even a customer can follow these test cases and certify that the product is being built correctly. Helps us build the right software, and they are also termed as running tested features. So a particular user story and the acceptance tests for those, so it can be considered as a absolutely running and a testable feature. So we went through two aspects. One is what exactly is acceptance test driven development, and the other is what are acceptance tests. Now let me focus on what should be the exact, what should be the QA processes in your acceptance test driven development. Here I would also focus on what should be the roles and responsibilities of testers in Agile. In Agile too, we have various phases such as release planning, sprint activities, and your hardening or regression phase, followed by a production deployment. So in release planning, majorly what we do is probably the scope of the release is finalized during release planning. But what are the roles and responsibilities of QA in this release planning is very important, and this actually paves for some base to be created for your testing throughout the release. So the role of a QA is when the release planning is going on. So probably what we call a sprint 0 in any release for an Agile. In sprint 0 or the release planning phase, we have to, as a QA, we need to do analysis of all the requirements or the features, epics that are being being targeted for this particular release. So all these epics are analyzed. They are broken down into MRFs. MRFs is nothing but your minimum releasable feature. And once they are broken down into MRFs, they are further broken down into user stories. So there is a three-step process of breaking down your requirements into a very small unit called as a user story. So here the QA is responsible to identify, to analyze the particular user story, estimate for this particular user story, and this estimation needs to consider everything, right from writing of your test cases to reviews, automating those test cases to execution of test cases. So when a QA is estimating for a story, he has to take these parameters into consideration for each and every story. Similarly, a test plan can be created at this point where you have the entire release backlog being created at this point in time, which can actually impact your remaining system, and you also identify what regression cases you may need to run to certify this particular release. So these are the two main activities that QA should do as a part of release planning activity. The next is sprint activity. During the sprint activity, the first thing comes is sprint planning. So here the QA has to create tasks for the different user stories within those sprints. The QA begins with writing of the acceptance test. So he writes acceptance test, and there is a unique format in which the acceptance test can be written. So I'll explain you how it is written for any acceptance test driven development. You have different tools which will enhance your acceptance test driven development, and one such tool is Cucumber JVM. So I'll explain how a test case is written in Cucumber JVM, but acceptance tests are written in a plain English language, and hence we say that even a BA can be able to write such acceptance tests. So a QA will write an acceptance test at this juncture. The QA and dev team, they review these acceptance test cases. The dev team takes the acceptance test cases, reviews them. Similarly, the unit test cases that are written by the dev team are also reviewed by the QA team, so as to minimize any scenario which can be missed. Then the QA automates the acceptance test cases. Continuous integration is an integral part of Agile, and it is said to be the best, one of the best practices in Agile. So at this point in time, a QA should execute smoke test, and whatever new features that are being developed within that sprint should be run through CI process. You have to run the entire automated acceptance tests that are being built in a particular sprint, as well as that you have been building up till that point in time, and run your automated regression suite. So these are the sprint activities that a QA should focus when he is testing in an Agile environment. The next is your hardening or regression phase. So in this phase, the roles and responsibilities of a QA would be to run all the test cases that are related to this release. So if you have built an automation suite for this particular release, you can actually go ahead and run the entire automation suite. You can also, you will have to also run all the manual cases as well in this particular release. In addition, you need to also execute complete regression suite. So as you have already planned the same thing when in your release planning phase, the same regression suite can be run, and all relevant manual cases. So these are the different QA processes that needs to be followed in different phases of acceptance test driven development. So now I spoke about getting the things automated within the sprints so that you can actually start building up your regression suite. Now let us first focus on the traditional approach that most of us practice. Okay, the usual mindset of a tester is I cannot automate unless the UI is stable or unless I get those screens where I can actually test. So the very method that a QA follows is write the test cases, wait for the developers to deliver, manually verify your acceptance test cases, and then probably go and start automating. But actually this creates a backlog of automation tasks. So let us pictorially see this. So I am in release 1. Okay, I have just begun my sprint 1. So the QA is writing the test cases. The developers may deliver probably at the end of the sprint 1. The tester may execute the test cases manually. He has not yet started with automation. And I begin sprint 2. So at this point in time, there is no automation that has been done as of now. Now, once I get my screen, the tester starts automating the features of sprint 1. Similar things happen for the corresponding sprints. And if you see this, I have ended my sprint 4, but still I am automating sprint 3. So this is nothing but a backlog of automation tasks, and as the release ends and a new release begins, this backlog would keep on increasing. I am definitely building my regression suite, but this regression suite is not complete and not sufficient for me to execute it every sprint. So probably at the end of sprint 2, I am ready to execute automated cases of sprint 1. This is my hardening phase. I have still not automated my entire suite. I have started beginning my release 2, but still I have automation tasks which are not yet being automated. And probably in release 2, I start automating some of the cases of probably even sprint 4 and sprint 5 as well. So this is a traditional approach. Now how to get back to what we want to achieve, and that is in sprint automation. Let us see this. Okay, so I have my sprints. Okay, I have sprint 1. I'll automate all my features in sprint 1. Similarly for sprint 2, sprint 3, sprint 4 and 5. If I do this, what are the benefits that I get? So as soon as my sprint 1 finishes, I have automated all the features that I can automate for the sprint 1. That means I have some suite that is already created and which I can run even at the start of the sprint 2. Similarly for sprint 2, I have automated everything. So as my sprints are getting over, my regression suite is also being built up. And every sprint, I am running my entire regression suite. So I can start running the entire thing right from sprint 2. So even as soon as I finish my sprint 5, which is nothing but your code cutoff probably for that particular release, I have my entire suite, new features automated and ready to be used as a regression suite for the next release as well as for the current release as well. Now what are the benefits of this? The benefits of this are during the hardening sprint, when I am supposed to run all my regression suite, all the test cases of current release, since I have automated, I save a lot of time basically while executing my test cases. So the execution becomes faster, time to market can be faster, and eventually you can achieve a state where even this hardening can be pulled off and the things can go into production directly. So the time to market increases tremendously by achieving automation in sprint. I'll also explain how it can be done through the framework that I'll probably showcase. Okay, this is a particular framework which has been developed using Selenium and Cucumber JVM, but this framework is a very generic framework and can be used irrespective of what tool you are using. So we have something called as a core driver. The core driver is nothing but it can be, in this case, it is a build.xml file where you can actually define what exactly you want to run as a part of your automation suite. So the core driver will have a definition of which features probably to run. Okay. So it has a feature is nothing but your user story. It can directly map to a user story. So for each user story, you can have a single feature file, or multiple stories can be there in a single feature file as well. So every feature, so after a core driver, there is another driver which is a feature driver, which will tell which exactly features you want to execute. So when you are defining a feature file, probably you can also define the priority items in those feature files, and depending upon the priority items, you can define which priority items you want to execute. So hence there are two levels of drivers, one which will tell you what exactly, or on a high level, which feature files you want to run, and the other which features within the feature files you want to run. So this feature file is nothing but your test cases that you write. So there is no redundancy of test case writing activity. So whatever you write in this particular feature file serves as your test case. Every feature file will have an underlying fixture file, which is nothing but a test script developed in Selenium. Okay, so every feature file will have a corresponding fixture file. There are certain library files that probably you can create. So all common code that you want to have within your system can go as a part of your library file. So that as much as common code that you can write, it will give you a high reusability, and as you start building up this library files, you will eventually find that the work or the script that you have to write out here is minimal, and it will actually help you to create those automation scripts right within the sprint. So initially you may have, you may find it a little difficult to achieve instant automation because there is a lot of code that is required, but eventually as this file starts building up, you will start achieving the same. The other aspect is your object repository. By keeping an object repository away from your actual code will enable you to start scripting your automation code right in the beginning before actually the developers gives you the screen. Now any automation engineer, if we ask, the main requirement for any automation engineer is object recognition. So when a screen is obtained, basically he normally goes, does a record and playback, probably identifies how an object is being identified by the automation tool, and then inputs that object within the scripts. But by segregating this away from your code, all that you need to do before the screen is available is write the entire automation code, and the only dependency that you have from the developers to render the screen would be the objects. And if we have certain coding practices put in place, such as every object can be defined. So there is a standard way to define an object. For example, it's a button. So I'll start. It's a save button. So I might put an ID for it saying that btn_save, which will identify my button. So if that standard is also set in place, then probably the testers need not be dependent on the developers to give the screens before they can automate. So if any automation engineer is well versed with the automation tool that is being used, then he should be able to write at least 80 to 85% of the code before the screen is delivered. And this is the very reason that, or this is the only way that you can actually implement automation within the scripts. And the reports are generated by the Cucumber JVM, and this particular framework is such that it is hooked to continuous integration, so that whenever there are builds which are getting deployed onto the test environment through continuous integration, once they get deployed, it will automatically start your smoke test, which is again in a very similar manner. So when you are defining a feature file, you can also tag certain scenarios within those feature files as @smoke, which with this functionality is probably provided by Cucumber JVM. So you can actually tag them as @smoke and then just run the smoke test cases. Similarly, you can also execute acceptance test cases via CI builds, and you will get, all the stakeholders can get a report after the execution of acceptance tests. Okay, let me quickly give you an example of how an acceptance test is written. It is called as GWT. It's like given, when, then. So given is your precondition, when would be your steps, and then would be your expected output. So any project who is following ATDD methodology can write test cases in this particular format. Okay, so this is a typical example of a test case in Cucumber. It looks like, given I register for a webinar on TechGig and I receive a webinar link. Okay, so this is my precondition. So to begin this particular seminar, I have to register for a webinar on TechGig and I have to receive that webinar link. Okay, when I click on the webinar link, so this is a step that a user has to perform. Then I should be directed on the TechGig site and I should see Join Expert Speak button. So this is my expected outcome. So a test case is written in a very simple plain English language with the terminologies used of those products that you are developing. And this is where we say that this particular test case can be written even by the BA. So the requirements can directly come from BAs as well. Okay. And these are nothing but your acceptance criteria, and this is how even the customers can verify whether you have built the right thing. So when a customer wants to run this particular test case, he understands what exactly he is running. Okay, I'll just show you a live example of GWT, how it is written. So it's just a demo application of Redbus. So if you can see this, this is a Java IDE that is being used. So when you use Selenium, as we all know, it supports multiple languages, and currently what we have used in our projects is Java. So this is an IDE, Eclipse, and this is a particular or typical feature file. If you see this, if we see this, there is something called as @redbus seat availability or @cucumber demo. @1.0, @hi. So these are various tags by which you can actually tag your feature file. So in the same manner as I mentioned, you can actually tag some of your test cases or some of your scenarios as @smoke test. And when you want to run just the smoke test, so the core driver will tell that you have to run just the smoke test, and all the feature files which have @smoke tag would get executed. So this is a simple feature that is being explained. In order to know availability of the bus seats to travel on Redbus online ticket agent in India, as a user, I want to check the availability of bus seats to travel in India from online bus ticket agent. These are different features of Cucumber JVM where I have written a background. Probably I can explain you this in detail. Background is nothing but a particular step which you think will get repeated throughout this particular feature file. So every scenario that I am writing, this particular step would be common for all the test cases that I'll write in this particular feature file. And hence I can actually separate that particular step and put them in background. So I need not write that every time that I am writing a test case. The other thing is scenario outline. So this is a particular scenario where the application should display availability of seats for one-way journey if bus services are available. Here we have written a GWT called as given I enter the cities from source point to destination point. These two are nothing but your parameters, and you can actually fill in the values. Here if you see source point and destination point, you have been mentioned values as Mumbai, Hyderabad. So these are the two values that would go into this parameter, and you can actually mention n number of parameters out here, and as much as parameters that you have or as much as values that you have for those parameters, let us say Mumbai, Hyderabad, I can say give Mumbai, Bangalore. So as many times the values are mentioned, this test case would get executed that many times, each time taking a different value for that parameter. And I enter date of journey for next day. When I search the buses, then the availability should be displayed for one way if buses are available. Now this is a particular test case. Here, for example, I can give a tag out here saying that @smoke. So this particular test case will get executed every time smoke test runs. Okay. Similarly, I can prioritize my test cases. So for here, this prioritization of 1.0 could be a release. The priority is high. So when I say when this thing is high, this is applied to the entire feature file. Else, you can also do is you can actually tag every test case with a priority, so that when you say high, all the test cases which are marked as high can be run. So this is a very simple test case file, and if you see, the amount of time that I will require to write a test case drastically reduces. If I am writing a test case in an Excel, I have so many columns to fill in basically with my data, with my preconditions. So all these things can be clubbed as a single test cases with different sets of data. Also, you can see that since I have written something which is very common, it again reduces my time of writing test cases. And not only this, when I write a fixture file, for example, when I am saying writing a fixture file is nothing but writing a code basically against this particular written statement. So that also I'll have to write just once, and anyone who is using this particular common step can reuse that functionality. So as I mentioned that initially to build library files, you may take a little time, but eventually once your library files are written, you are just reusing those aspects. So this is how a feature file looks like. This is exactly how the code is written. So I'll just go back. Okay, let us say I'll just show you, given I logged in as a user in online Redbus services. Let us see the code written for it. Okay.
Hello Jyoti, we cannot hear you. There's some issue with your voice.
Hello. Hello. Okay. I think we got disconnected probably sometimes when I was actually explaining you the code for the given. So let us just begin from here. So as I mentioned, so this is a particular line which is there in your feature file against which you are writing the code, and this is a particular function called as login red bus. This login red bus has a Selenium code under it, and as you can see that there is absolutely no object that is embedded in this particular code, and this actually enables us to start writing the automation code right well in advance before any screen is delivered to you. So you need to just, if you see this, this is the object that needs to be recognized on the screen. So this is tbx user underscore username. So this is a text box underscore username. So these are certain things that probably we have followed in our code, and this is what needs to be pulled at the time when your automation code is running. So you can just define an object either later in the stage when you get the screen, or if you have a developer sitting next to you, you can actually speak to him as to get those object identifiers, or else if you have a standard practice in place of defining each and every object with an ID, then probably you can even start using the same. So this is exactly how the code is written against a GWT. So let me take you through the benefits that are there as a part of following ATDD as well as doing in-sprint automation within the sprint itself. Is one biggest advantage is you have a high percentage of test cases that are automated within the sprint. So this itself leads to the second benefit that is being written is increased testing efficiency. So now that you have so much of your test cases automated, you can actually execute them very fast, and this will also enable the testers to do additional ad hoc testing if required during the sprint as well as during your hardening or system test phases. The biggest advantage again is you actually capture defects right in the beginning. So you have your test suite that is automated, and you can run them whenever you want. So every sprint the test cases are getting executed, the regression suite is getting executed. So any impact of the latest features on any of the regressed areas can be identified immediately, and those defects can be captured early in the development phases itself. You are doing real continuous integration. So by enabling automation right in the sprint one, you are ready to run the automation script on any build that comes. So if you can actually implement real continuous integration only because you have automated such a huge test cases, and you should be able to run them every time. Motivated workforce. So the ability to run automation tests early basically will increase the confidence of the testers for a particular product, and definitely will increase the peace of mind and transparency in the team. So this is definitely going to motivate the entire workforce, and the framework that has been explained is a reusable framework. So this, as I mentioned, can be used across, it can be used independent of the tool and even independent of the application. So this is how it can be actually used. I'll just take you through a case study very quickly, where this particular implementation has been done for a maintenance project where there was a huge legacy code before the team started working on those, and how we have basically implemented. So this is exactly what we follow is sprint 0, where the entire release planning requirements, scoping and documentation happens along with your test planning. These are different sprints within the particular release. So as a part of sprint, you do sprint planning. There is a Test Driven Development ATDD, which is followed by the developers. Now this ATDD, as I explained, but these are some best practices that have been put in this particular project. So apart from ATDD, we also follow TDD, which is your Test Driven Development, which is done by the developers, and they write their unit test cases and even automate the same. So they are currently using Mockito as a framework for unit test cases. We have static code analysis also implemented, where we use fisheye and where we use checkstyle and find bugs as a static code analysis tools, and the code reviews are done through fisheye. So there are many tools that are being used which have enabled us to practice ATDD in this particular project. There is a continuous integration where the build gets deployed onto the test environment twice a day, and the execution of smoke tests, new features happens twice a day through the CI process, which actually helps us detect defects early in the life cycle. We run the entire regression suite that is being created release over release, and that is being run at the end of the sprint, and there are sprint demos and retrospectives. So as a part of sprint demo where the product owner is sitting, we actually also run the acceptance tests, and the product owner actually certifies on the basis of that. So it is aptly called as your customer test. So this is regression suite that is being built, and we have a hardening phase where we execute the entire AT suite, which is nothing but your acceptance test suite, the regression suite, as well as your non-automated cases. And if you see, the hardening phase lag is overlapping the sprint 0 of the next release. So you can see there is 100% resource utilization. So the developers are not free in this particular period, but they actually start with the requirement analysis of the other. And since testers test this and complete the testing well in advance, they also move to the sprint 0. And this has enabled us to actually release the product faster to the market. Certain metrics that I would like to highlight after we implemented this particular methodology. We have 0 defects captured in the system testing. So we initially had a system testing phase beyond a hardening phase, but now that phase has been scrapped because there were no defects found in system testing and there was no need. So it actually saved us 2 weeks of time to push the release into production. So earlier by 2 weeks, and there are 0 regress defects in production. Eventually, the idea is to even get away with the hardening sprint. As I mentioned, we have fisheye, checkstyle, and find bugs as our tools, and we have somewhere around 97% compliance achieved, which is a code compliance for static code. We have also integrated Sonar Cube, which also gives us a dashboard. Just a quick look probably at the dashboard, where it actually tells us how many lines of code. You can see the compliance being shown here. It can be integrated with your functional or acceptance testing suite, and you can also see the code coverage as well. So the regression suite is 83%. Regression suite is automated, and this is because you have been achieving in sprint automation release over release. So your automation suite is very high. I mean, in terms of percentage, is very high. And these are the different TDD and ATDD practices that probably we are following. So if you see, these are again certain productivity QA metrics where the productivity has increased nearly 143%, and if you see a total savings of around 17K till June 13. This is the automation ROI, which is being captured year over year, and we currently stand at 85% of effort ROI on the automation, which has led to a savings of around $492 $492K over these years, and this is a huge savings on the cost. And these are the benefits that we have got, that this project has been delivering. Is high automation coverage, around 85% of automation during sprints, and overall 83% regression tests are automated. The number of resources have been reduced by 37.5% and execution time by almost 50%. The automation effort ROI has been 75 to 85%, and if you see this has been around 500K as I showed in the slide before. The productivity definitely has increased to 143%. The quality speaks when we say there are 0 regress defects in production, and the framework that has been developed is extendable to almost all other applications that are being using automation within our company. Thank you, everyone. So I'll just take some questions. Okay, this is being asked by Yuva Sri Suresh K. Is it necessary to create test cases by developers, or we can use QA's test cases? Because QA's test cases, little stuff when reading developers, how to overcome. Not really understood, but you can definitely use the QA test cases, and this is what even we practice. So whatever test cases, acceptance test cases are written by the developer, by the QA, are being given to the developers, which they review, and before they actually give us certify that the QAs can begin testing, they are supposed to run the acceptance tests to see that there are no defects present. Okay, the other question is, how do we categorize test cases written as a part of acceptance test cases to be moved to regression cycle? What you can do is probably you can actually, when you are writing any of the test cases, you can always prioritize them. You can also tag them as to certain test cases which needs to be run irrespective of whether there is any code that has been touched into that test case or not. So you can actually identify those. Plus your segregation of the test cases should be in such a manner that all the functional test cases pertaining to a module or pertaining to an epic should be together, so that you can actually identify what test cases should be run as a part of regression test. Okay, there is one more question saying during sprint 1 cycle, as a QA manager, what are the documents I refer for progress in testing? So in Agile, basically during release planning he's asking more from a sprint 1 cycle. So there will be definitely a requirement in the form of user stories acceptance criteria. So these are the documents that a QA manager should refer to, plus there could be design docs as well. So all these documents should be referred by any QA who is writing test cases. One more question that has been asked by Manas Kumar is what tools you use for code review and code analysis. As I mentioned, we use Checkstyle and Findbox for code review for the static code analysis, and for code review we are currently using Fisheye. Venkateshwara is asking, how about reporting in this framework? Okay, the reporting basically is given by the Cucumber JVM, which you can customize, and a mail actually even it can be configured in a CI such that once the acceptance test gets over, a mail can be sent to all the stakeholders. Okay, there is someone who has asked, hello, in the short sprint release cycle, when will I get the time to automate test cases? Will I get ROI? As I mentioned in my presentation, that you can actually start beginning writing of automation code right in the beginning, where you need not actually wait for the developer to give you the screens to automate. So if you start and if you are ready with your code, which is around 85%, then I think you can even achieve automation within the sprint. We also have just 2 weeks sprint, and we managed to automate our features within the sprint itself. Okay, there is one more question. In this sprint cycle, my automation is not getting progressed and it's taking time to automate. As a QA manager, what should I do? There could be times when probably in the sprint cycle, you may not actually get time to automate. In that case, a particular user story, I mean, you can direct the user story in such a manner that the QA tasks can be shifted to the next sprint and can be done. So the user story should get accepted only when all the tasks which are there within the user stories are completed and accepted, then only the user story should get marked as accepted. What is exactly work of Cucumber? Is it similar to TestNG or something else? This has been asked by Mayank. Cucumber JVM is a framework very similar to TestNG. It has its own annotations of given, when, then. And since Selenium cannot be used as a tool independently, and you have to use some framework over Selenium. So Cucumber is an ATDD framework basically. It suits ATDD development methodology. Okay, someone has asked, Karthik Prakash has asked, how can a page object model design pattern be used in ATDD. At least from an automation perspective, you can define your framework. So we mentioned a user story has a feature file, right? So you can actually have all your test cases related to a particular page in a single feature file. So that in that way, probably you can achieve your page object model. Okay, Maya has asked if dev and testing is with different vendors, by how uh, by how will quality of testing team would be evaluated if there are no bugs, as acceptance test cases are shared already with the development team. So the idea here is to detect the defects early in the life cycle. So maybe developers are finding those defects using the acceptance test, but eventually we also have found that since a particular feature is being tested in, let us say, sprint 1, and due to some fixes in sprint 2, your feature in sprint 1 is broken, then your acceptance tests which are run or through automation will actually automatically even capture them. So it is not about the quality of QA team as such, but definitely this process is more towards minimizing the defects right at the start and not finding it later at later stages. Yeah, I think I've answered most of the questions.
Well, thank you so much for answering all the questions, Jyoti. Thanks for the insightful presentation as well. It was a great session. I would
Thank you.
also like to thank all our participants for for the support and making this webinar a success. The recording of this session would be available on techgig.com by evening. Thank you all. Have a great day.